Welcome to MarshStream. Welcome to Stephanie's MarshStream. Tonight we have our wonderful special guest, Fred Pitts. Pitts, an actor, a writer, a solo performer, a doctor. Can't wait to talk to him. Hello, Fred. How are you?
Hey, Stephanie. How are you? Thanks for having me in.
So glad to have you here.
Hey.
Tell us about yourself. Let's just start with you telling us about yourself.
Now, how long do we have? Well, I was born in Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, southwest part. Both my parents, my father was a civilian with the Air Force. He ran the government computer center, and my mother was an educator. And in Ohio in the 70s, it was interesting because it was segregated. You know, we lived on the west side of town, which was the black side of town, and everybody else was on the other side of town. So I went to school on the west side of town initially, and then I was moved to a white Catholic school on the other side of town when I was in 6th grade. So that was my first real interaction with people who didn't look like me. Got through high school, went to a Catholic high school, went to college in Michigan, which was completely different than Ohio. If you're in Ohio, you're supposed to go to Ohio State. I did not. I went to the University of Michigan. It's kind of like going to Cal versus Berkeley out here. So I was a true traitor in the eyes of many of my high school classmates at the time. And got through college. I wanted to be a doctor at some point, but I really wanted to be an actor. And my father, more than my mother, said, look, we don't mind the acting thing. Just become a doctor first. Then at least you'll not have to worry about how you can pay your bills. I didn't like the idea at the beginning, but I took his advice. I applied for medical school. I got in. I did med school in Cleveland at Case Western. And while I was there, I should backtrack a little bit. I've been on stage since I was 5. So I've been doing theater since I was 5 years old. And even in medical school, I ran what was a thing called Doc Opera, which was a show that a senior medical student had produced 3 years before I got there, where the medical students basically got on stage and wrote their own show. Essentially, we were doing popular music and just rewriting the lyrics to apply to medical school. So I performed in that the first year, and then I directed it the last 3 while going through med school. And then after that, I went to Chicago for residency training in emergency medicine, which was interesting, doing emergency medicine in Chicago. I didn't do much acting while I was in residency until maybe my last year, and I started getting back into it. And somehow, once I got through residency, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to stay in Chicago or move someplace else. And it turns out I had applied for a job out in San Francisco, actually in Oakland, because my brother was already out here in San Francisco as a lawyer. Applied for a job at a hospital in an emergency department, got it, moved out here in 1997, and I've been out here doing the medical thing ever since, and pretty much doing theater the same amount of time. So that's sort of me in a nutshell. And you can unpack that as you want.
All I want you to know is my father went to Ohio State.
Did you really? Oh, perfect.
But he was from New York.
Oh, wow. That's far away. No, when you're in high school in Ohio, you live and breathe and you eat Ohio State. I mean, I was an Ohio State fan. I knew the Buckeye battle cry. I watched all the games. I hated Michigan. And then when it came time to apply for college, my dad said, well, apply to Ohio State, but let's look at some other schools out of state. And I applied to Michigan and I got in. And I wasn't really serious about going until I went to campus. And I think we drove in campus on a Friday afternoon, and I saw a bunch of guys on a rooftop throwing a keg off. And I seriously said, okay, I'm going here. So that was.
That's a good reason. That's a good reason to switch out on states, because I'm sure they were doing that at Ohio.
I'm sure they were. Yeah.
Tell me how your acting affected you being a doctor, and then how your doctor has affected being an actor.
It's funny. When I really got into acting again, probably 98, 99, out here, I started taking an acting class with a gentleman named Cliff Osmond, who was a old school Hollywood actor, but he had acting classes, film acting classes in San Francisco and in LA. And I remember the first time I did the class and started performing a scene, his comment was, you seem you seem to be holding a lot of things back. And I didn't understand what he was saying. And he finally said, look, you work as a doctor. You've told me you work in the emergency department. He said, how emotional do you have to get in the ER? And I said, you can't get emotional in the emergency department at all. You know, you're dealing with life and death and everything. So you have to be the emotional rock with everybody you're dealing with. And he said, okay, great. In acting, throw that away, because nobody wants to see you be boring on screen. You have to let go and let all those emotions you suppress in your practice come out in your acting. So that was the challenge for a while, just trying to understand that, yes, I could be emotional, I could be attached to patients if I wanted to, but that would drive me crazy because I get too involved with them. So you had to separate yourself from them. So when I was doing acting, that was my release. In many ways, Cliff used to say it was free therapy. So all those emotions that I had suppressed in life in general because of medicine, acting allowed me to release them and experience them and appreciate them and really enjoy them, because that's what makes life interesting. You know, the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, everything. So it's been an amazing balance with the two. And as I got further and further in my career, both with acting and with medicine, you kind of learn how to balance them both. In fact, when I was seeing patients, I was a lot more empathic. I would let emotions come out a little bit more, not to the point where I couldn't control the situation, but just realize that you don't have to be a robot. You can be involved with what's going on with the patient. You can understand what's going on with them. You can make them feel comfortable, that kind of thing. So I think that really helped with my practice as I got older. I sound like I'm like 90.
You're not 90?
Nope, I'm not.
Okay, Fred, how old are you?
I just
You
turned.
don't have to tell me.
Okay, I won't tell you.
Oh, come on.
Okay, I just turned 55 in June.
Oh, and did you just retire as well? Are you retired?
No, I did 20 years of emergency medicine and I got out in 2013, and then I did about a year and a half of primary care, and I just got out of doing 5 years of occupational medicine. I was running a workers' comp clinic in San Francisco for 5 years, and I finally decided at a certain point, you know, I think I've had my fill of direct patient care. So in a couple of days, actually on Monday, starting a new job in medicine, but not taking care of patients, doing what's essentially called drug safety. So I'll be taking care of looking at charts and making sure that medications out there are appropriately given, and looking and making sure that there are no side effects or ill effects with new meds, with old meds, with drug trials, all of that. And that's going to be a fascinating new part of my life.
So is that at a hospital, or where do you work?
It's going to be at a biotech company in the peninsula. There's a lot of biotech in the peninsula, so I'm going to be doing that, you know, hopefully for a few years, and at some point I'll decide that I need to retire. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, no need to retire if you don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, as long as I'm happy working, and this is a brand new field, it's something I don't know. I'm excited to learn it. It gives me more time to do a lot more theater writing when we get back to theater once COVID's over. So I'm really looking forward to that.
So when you say you're working at a biotech company, are you then basically dealing with whatever drugs they're producing and, you know, and seeing the effects?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, I think my job is basically going to be working with the world of HIV meds. So there are a lot of medications out there. They work with primarily antivirals. I know that we're going to be doing some work with the medication that's out with COVID. So a lot of it's going to be looking at paperwork, looking at charts, understanding how the drugs interact, looking at good effects, bad effects, seeing how we need to change and manipulate things. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
That sounds really interesting, actually.
Yeah, totally different.
So before we get on to your acting, tell us what you're thinking about COVID these days and any.
Yeah, it's an interesting world we live in. I've got friends, former partners who are in the emergency department, still on the front lines. So I've been hearing about it really much from day one. Just trying to take care of patients, trying to protect ourselves. In our clinic, the occupational medicine clinic I used to work in, when shelter in place started, we were very busy initially, but then it dropped off because people started working from home or they weren't working at all. But we never got to the point where we weren't seeing anybody. And we started seeing people coming in with symptoms, without symptoms. And now that companies are starting to open up, the company or the clinic was starting to see a lot more employees coming back into work after having been off for a while, or getting assessed for symptoms if they were exposed or around somebody with COVID. So that was very challenging with work. Really was. It's just been interesting. It's interesting being on the inside of COVID with medicine, because you get to see the mild effects, you get to see the severe effects. Fortunately for me, we're not a primary care clinic, so really it was people who had initial early symptoms that we could either test or send off to another facility for higher level of care. So we never really got involved with people who had real symptomatology or people who got really, really sick.
Tell me where
So,
you're working right now. I'm confused. I don't remember.
Well, I was working
We're
for
working.
I was working with at an occupational medicine clinic in San Francisco. I won't mention the name clearly, but then I'll be working at a company called Gilead.
But
In
you were seeing the one when you were talking about COVID. You were seeing people at the occupational place.
Yeah, we also did some urgent care. So we'd see a few people who came in with symptoms, and we would do some initial testing with people. We would also primarily take care of, as I said, employees, people who work for UPS, FedEx, construction workers, essential workers who either were out because they had symptoms or were around someone who had symptoms, or the company wanted their employees tested before they came back to work. So we were heavily involved with testing and notifying results of employees or of people who work for certain companies.
So do you have any
Very
advice?
interesting.
Yeah. Would you, as an insider as such, to where you are, do you have any
The basics
feelings about
are,
how things are going to go? Like, are we ever going to get out of this? What do you think?
I mean, as disease go, I think we will get out of it. We survived the pandemic flu in 1918. I think we have enough information out there. People just have to be smart. You know, you wear a mask, you wash your hands when you're outside, you wash your hands when you go back in, you don't touch your face, you don't touch your mouth, you don't touch your nose. It's the same kind of basic hygiene we should be doing all the time. But the mask thing, I think, is the biggest way, in my view, of preventing spread, because most of the medical science folks out there will say the same thing, that it's usually spread by aerosol, by contact. You wear the mask, you know, there's enough data out that shows that two people are wearing a mask and they're socially distanced, the transmission rate is minuscule. It's the other problem we have with this virus is that there are people who have the virus who are asymptomatic. They won't have any symptoms, but if they sneeze or cough or breathe, it can still be transmitted. And if you're around someone who's older or someone who has any kind of another medical problem, you know, they could get it. So it's just, I call it common sense medicine. Wear the mask, wash your hands, social distance, as little social contact with a lot of people as possible. That's the best way to keep it in check until medical science gets to the point of having a vaccine, and then people can get vaccinated and move forward from there. And we're still working on different medications to treat the illness, the certain levels of illness. A few of them are showing promise. It's a long way to go, though.
I just read a study. My husband told me about a study where tall people are getting, he keeps reading things. Tall people are more likely to get it. And people with blood type A don't have as much resistance or immunity towards it. Have you heard anything about any of these things? I
mean, just what I've read. Like I said, that's not really my specialty. It never was really, which is fortunate for me because I don't have to learn a lot about it. But you know, when you read medical science, that's out there. I think medical science is really trying to get a better handle on what this virus is. I mean, it's not like the flu, which has been around for a long time. This is a brand new virus. So different people are reacting different ways. They're trying to decide if you can get the virus again, if the body mounts an immune response if you get it the first time, whether the vaccine is going to work or not. So there's a lot of information out there. It's just hard to find and filter your way through what's accurate and what's not. There's also a lot of misinformation out there. So I think the simplest thing for most people, that's why I tell my friends, is wear the mask, wash your hands, social distance. Those are the best things I can tell people at this point. Just stay safe, you know?
I know when you're
Yeah.
outside, you're trying to be really safe. I try to be very safe. I haven't been to a
Yep.
store in 4 months or however many months it's been. And
Oh,
then there's all these people, they run past me and they breathe all over me. And
well,
like,
I mean, I think as long as people are wearing masks, it really the literature says exposure is about spending a little bit longer period of time with people in a closer space. So I think majority of us, as long as we're wearing masks and practicing social distancing, we minimize the risk.
I'm talking about those guys who don't wear a mask run right by me,
Mhm,
no social
mhm,
distancing because they're too
mhm.
tired from running that they can't go out in the street or something. But anyway, you can be rest assured I have my mask on.
Good. I'm
Anyway,
glad.
so thank you. Thank you very
No
much.
problem. No problem.
So, tell me a little bit about your show. First of all, you were gonna open your show at the Marsh. When was that supposed to happen?
That was supposed to open Easter weekend, which I think was April 11th or 12th.
Mhm.
It was supposed to close Mother's Day weekend, I believe, and COVID happened. This was interesting. Um, yeah, my show essentially is. Let me give you the backstory. I'm a history geek, and I talk about that in the story. And in 2012, for whatever reason, history geeks like to go see old things. That's what I do. So I had been on a wine tasting trip in Sonoma, and stumbled on Solano Mission, and walked in and liked it and enjoyed it, and then had an interesting interaction with the person that was there. And I started reading up on missions and said, I've known about missions. I went to Catholic schools in Ohio. They talked about them, but it didn't register with me that they were so close. So I grabbed a map and found where all of them are and thought, you know what? This is going to be a really good geeks holiday. So I decided I wanted to take a road trip to see all 21 missions. And as I started seeing missions, I kept having these interesting interactions with people where they would ask me if I knew who this famous person was, and they said I looked like this person. It happened the first couple times. Didn't think much of it, and I was on Facebook at the time. Facebook was a little different than it is now, which is this big political thing, but back then it was just you kind of posted what was going on in your life. And I posted a couple of instances of I was at this mission and someone said I looked like this person. And then the next day I was in another mission and someone said I looked like this person. And then the third day, the same thing happened. And at one point in the Facebook post I wrote, I'm just going to call this tour the California Race and Missions Tour. It kept happening. And all my friends, including my girlfriend at the time, were looking on Facebook every day to find out, well, who does he look like today? What happened today? Did he find somebody? Did he see somebody? Did someone compare him to somebody famous again? And it kept happening. And while this was going on, a couple of friends of mine, one local, Elizabeth Creeley, shout out, and another friend of mine from high school, Monica Ditrio, both separately said, Fred, you really should turn this into a solo show. And I didn't really think about it because I'm an actor and I know solo performance. I knew the Marsh. I'd seen Don Reed and I've seen Tina D'Elia stuff and I've seen Dan Hoyle stuff and sorry, Brian Copeland. So I knew solo performance was out there, but I never thought I was that kind of a person because when you're just a straight stage actor, you're used to being on stage with your fellow actors and you do dialogue and you create scenes. And I just didn't think I had it in me. Well, I said, well, maybe I should think about this. So I pulled all the Facebook posts down and I put them into a Word document and sort of sat on it for several years. At one point, I think in 2015 or 16, I started looking on the Marsh website because I knew they had solo classes, how to write your own show. And truth be told, I think I signed up for David Ford's class twice, but had to back out twice because I was getting cast in other shows. And finally, the summer of 2017, just after I got remarried, I wasn't doing a show. And I said, this might be a good time to pull out that Facebook Microsoft Word document about the trip I took. I signed up for David's class. I showed up the first day. Actually, Tina Delia was in the class as well. And I read the Facebook things. I didn't know the first thing about writing a solo show. And David listened to it and kind of was like, okay, there's a lot of stuff there. Let's see if we can start unpacking this. So over that first 12-week period, we started unpacking it and making it more personal, and then expanding on the experience and writing it into scenes. And then all of a sudden I had the first third of a show. And I did it at the class presentation, which everybody does for those classes. And I had a couple friends show up, including my wife at the time, current wife, and they all said, this would be really good. You need to keep working on this. So I think I did 2 other classes with David after that. And all of a sudden I had a show. During all that period, and I can't remember if it was after the first class presentation or the second one, Bruce Peckman was at one of those class performances and approached me and said, this could be a really good show for solo Sundays. So it turns out I would do 1/3 with the Marsh, and then I would do it at solo Sundays. I do the second third at the Marsh, do it at solo Sundays, do the third at the Marsh, and then do solo Sundays. Had a show, wasn't sure what to do with it or how to get it marketed. Started talking to David about it. I was going to start applying for fringe shows. Somehow I stumbled upon Playground, and Playground had just started a solo performance festival in 2018. And I applied for the 2019 show and I got accepted. So the first time the show that was called the California Missions and Race Tour was presented was January of 2019. True story. I was supposed to be the opening act for the festival, and it was on a Thursday night was opening. And on that Tuesday, I was still taking care of patients, and I believe I caught the flu from a patient. So the day before opening, I woke up with a fever of 103 and body aches and exhaustion. I could barely function. And I called the AD at Playground and said, I'm not sure if I should do this show because I can't really get out of bed. I ended up going in that afternoon for tech. My tech was low. It was really low key, just lighting in my flip chart. And I remember the stagehand person said, you don't look that great. You should probably just go home and see if you can do the show the next day. I went home. I took a lot of medication. I went to Playground that night. I opened the show. I did it. I don't remember much of any of it. But I really don't. But my wife and some friends said it went really well. At the same time, I had been given a slot to do part of the show with Tell It on Tuesday at the Marsh in Berkeley. So I did that first performance on a Thursday night. The following Tuesday, I did a portion at the Marsh. I did another performance of the full show the following Sunday. And then I applied for Marsh Rising, and I got a slot, and I did that performance there, and you were there. That's where I met you. And I'd never forget the conversation afterwards, because I knew you were there and I was scared to death, but you were really kind, very complimentary after the show. And I remember you specifically asking me, what do you want to do with your show? And I believe my answer was something like, well, I want to keep doing it. I'd love to do it at Marsh if it's a show you all think would work at your theater. And you said, well, we'll talk about that. Let's start working on that. So over the next couple of months, got in touch with David Harada, and we started figuring out how to make it work. In the meantime, I was still doing it with a couple of other, I did a piano fight a couple of times and a little solo performance thing in Redwood City. And we got scheduled and we were ready to go, and COVID. So it's kind of how it goes.
And now
This is okay.
Relook at it to have tonight to do an excerpt from it,
Yep,
and how you
yep.
do it on Zoom and how it works on Zoom.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. It's interesting. It's a show that can work on Zoom. We had to configure, as you can see, I think the video's still up. We just made a sort of little stage in our office. So we got the flip chart up, and I've got my pictures over there on the side and stage all ready. So yeah.
So why don't we get to it? Let's
Okay.
see what you've been working on.
All right. So let me give you a setup. So this is, I think this is the 4th through 7th mission. I'll just do 4. It's kind of in the beginning, but it'll give you a good flavor of what it's like to see the missions what the show's about, how I describe them, and the things that happened while I was at the missions. So let me get out of my chair and take a second and we'll get going. Let me just mute myself or take my video off. There we go. All right. Mission, San Francisco de Asís, 1776. Category, original. Useless mission factoid. This is the oldest standing structure in San Francisco. In the '06 earthquake, this church remained essentially intact while the Victorian church next to it collapsed. It has taken me 15 years of living in San Francisco to walk into Mission Dolores. Shame on me as a history geek, but I'm here today. I walk inside and I sit down in a pew. Man, stepping into history fills me with indescribable joy, especially old churches. I mean, the church I grew up in as a kid, the services used to scare me, but I loved sitting in the sanctuary alone. I mean, when I was a kid, that church was more than 100 years old, and I'd sit and I'd imagine my mother in a service during the Civil Rights Movement, or my grandmother during the Red Summer, 1919, or even her grandmother during Reconstruction. Now, earlier in my show, I've mentioned Notre Cathedral, and I've been very fortunate enough to have been there a few times, usually with throngs of tourists. One day, I walk in at 6 a.m., and I'm alone in this massive sanctuary. I mean, I'm standing where people have been praying for more than 800 years. If my grandmother had been there with me, she would have just put her hand on her heart and said, my heart was jumping. Well, my heart was jumping that day when I was in Mission Dolores. I mean, I could see the Native Americans, mostly by force, sitting in the pews. I could see Junipero Serra, father of the missions, love him or hate him, up there conducting mass. The interior, it's about the same as it was in 1776. I mean, the ceiling is covered in chevrons, designed and painted by the Native Americans. They're just alive with color. The reredo, which is the big wall structure behind the altar, is this huge overdone Spanish masterpiece with all this gold and statues all over the place. There are 5,700 Native Americans buried on the grounds, mostly under the school parking lot. However, the cemetery has an Ohlone Indian memorial. The Ohlone were on that mission site, and the museum has artifacts and tells their story. I spend an hour walking around this place, and then I go to the gift shop. As I am thumbing through mission books to buy, I hear, "You look so familiar." The lady behind the counter has been staring in a not so subtle way. I look up, smile, I go back to my book. She keeps staring. I pick out a book, I go to the counter to pay. "I know I've seen you somewhere. Oh, this is a really good book. Is this your first mission?" "No, this is my third, but this is the most impressive. I mean, how did it stay intact?" "Well, it stayed intact because its roof remained to protect it from the elements. All the other missions made of adobe either collapsed or melted in the rains when their roofs were stolen or removed during secularization." Secularization, I've heard that word before. What does that mean? "Well, when Spain," I've got it. Richard Roundtree. You look just like Richard Roundtree. Has anyone ever told you that? My girlfriends and I thought he was so hot, and he was black. Yeah, he's still black. They say this cat Shaft is a bad mother. Shut your mouth. Richard Roundtree, the original Shaft. Hey, at least she had taste. Shaft was cool. If you were a black kid in the 70s, you wanted to be Shaft. And back when I had a mustache, yeah, I know. This is Richard Roundtree today. Older than 70, his hairline is receding too, so I have hope. I give money to the lady for the book. "Well, enjoy your book, Shaft." I was going to ask her to explain secularization, but I didn't want her breaking into the Shaft theme song. So I ran to my car and I drove to my next destination, Mission del Gloriosimo Patriarca San Jose, Mission San Jose in Fremont. 1797, category, replicant. Useless mission factoid. This is the only mission built east of San Francisco Bay, also the only mission not directly on the El Camino Royal. The church was built in 1985. It's a complete reproduction of a church that stood on the grounds in 1830. Now, the interior is really nice, but kind of boring, like Fremont. So, got in my car, and I went on to my next mission. Mission Santa Clara de Assis, Santa Clara Mission, 1777. Category, replicant. Useless mission factoid. The bells of this church have rung every evening at 8:30 since 1798. Now, none of the original church remains. This church is actually a college chapel because in 1851, the Franciscans turned the land over to the Jesuits, who used it to create California's first college, Santa Clara University. Now, local missions done. I have about a week before starting the bulk of my trip, seeing all the rest of the missions all the way down to San Diego, the first one, more than enough time to read my new missions book cover to cover. Yeah, that didn't happen. So about a week later, I packed up my car and I started my journey south. First location, La Exaltación al Santa Cruz, Mission Santa Cruz, 1791. Category, replicant. Useless mission factoid. This is the site of California's first autopsy performed on Father Quintana, the local mission priest who used to beat the Native Americans with a wire-tipped chain. The coroner was called up from Mexico because Father Quintana died under mysterious circumstances. And that's the most interesting thing about this mission, except there's a sign that says this was the last mission secularized, and I still don't know what that word means. And then I remember, duh, I've got an unread mission book, time to break it open. I head to downtown Santa Cruz, I get a sandwich at a deli, I sit at an outdoor table, and I break open the book. Now, what follows is mission history in 60 seconds or less. Class, pay attention. California and Mexico were Spanish territories. The Spanish monarchy then sent Franciscan monks to Alta California to establish the missions. 21 missions were established in 54 years. First mission, anyone out there in internet land? I just mentioned it. San Diego, 1769. Last mission, anyone? Solano mission, 1823. Simple plan, establish a mission. Now, when they were established, they were supposed to be 1 day's ride apart on the El Camino Royal. Then you had to convert the Native Americans to Catholicism, mostly by force. Now, once these Native Americans could prove they could live in the Spanish way, the lands and the missions were supposed to be turned over to these neophytes. New word, neophytes, new converts. However, 1821, the Mexican government wins its independence from Spain, but they don't have the money to maintain and control the mission. So, 1834, secularization. Repeat it after me, please. Secularization. Good. The Mexican government boots the Spanish back to Spain and then decide to give, translate, sell, half the lands to these neophytes who have no money and the other half to the non-Native American Californios. Guess who got screwed? By the early 20th century, more than half of these missions were in absolute ruins. Now, as I'm reading all this, I look up and see an older white couple looking for a table. I'm done with my lunch. I decide to give it up. Sir, ma'am, you guys can have my table. They're excited. They come over. He's wearing a ponytail. Righteous, man. Thank you, my brother. He then proceeds to execute a perfect 5-point soul handshake. Better than anything I can do, but I look like Richard Roundtree, so I don't care. He keeps staring at me. He doesn't let go of my hand. Wow, man. You look just like Will Smith. Has anyone ever told you that? Will Smith, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Peace out, man. As I walk away from the table, I hear him say to his friend, Black people, so cool. Now, did he mean this Will Smith? Or did he mean this Will Smith? Where do I begin? If my grandmother had been there, she would have looked at him, shaking her head, and bless your heart, which is an old black lady way of saying, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but you an idiot. The whole handshake thing reminded me of Catholic school when I was a kid. And all the kids were kind of curious about me being black. Not mean. Okay, a couple of them were mean, but mostly curious. The most common thing to do was to touch my hair, which was an afro. There was one kid who was so fascinated with my hair because it was an afro at the time. He came in with his own blonde permed afro. Looked like a giant lemon-flavored chia pet. But that was in Ohio in the 70s. This was Santa Cruz like 8 years ago. Just a little bit surprising. Okay, if I think about it, not that surprising. Anyway, I had other missions to see, so I left my newfound soul brother at his table, got in my car, and I drove to my next mission, Mission San Juan Bautista. Tune in next time. Thank you. Coming over here.
Thank you, Fred.
Am I here? Am I here?
You're
There I
here.
am.
You're there. You're there. You're right there. That was
Okay.
wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How many
It's a
missions
fun
did
story
you
to tell.
go through?
We did 4. There are a total of 21.
And how long did that trip take you?
It was probably about 3 weeks. About 3 weeks.
7
The
missions a
first.
week.
Say again.
What, like 7 missions? How many missions did you say again?
There are 21 missions.
So 7 a week.
Yeah, it's a big long drive down to San Diego. So yeah, it's quite the trip. But I really loved it. I enjoyed it. You know, I kind of broke it up a little bit. I do 1 or 2 missions in a day, and then I stop and I do something else, and I do 3 more in a day, and I just do 1 a day at a certain point. So it was kind of all over the place. So
tell me,
yes, ma'am.
why? What's your theory on why people think they know who you are?
You know, I decided that as I went to see all these missions, really there were, I can count on my hand the number of Black people I saw at those missions. That's just not something Black people go to do. And I think sincerely, and no one was really mean. Well, one woman was really interesting. I talked about her in the show, but I think they were just trying to either show that they were enlightened or just to be nice, I guess. Just to say, hey, look, you're here. Hey, this is interesting. Let's just talk. And then, do I look like some of them? Some of them. Most of them, no. But I wasn't offended. It was just strange that it just kept happening.
Did it happen in every single mission, or what percentage?
I did the math, probably like 90% something happened. About.
Now,
there was something that happened that involved with me being Black at pretty much every mission. You know, majority of it was you look like. A couple of people thought I looked like somebody who was not famous, but who happened to be Black. So it was just it just kept getting more and more ridiculous. It really did.
what do you mean? What was when they didn't say you look like? What were those people?
Oh, it was just like one woman at one. I was at a Starbucks after seeing one mission. She was mad because I was the guy she tried to pick up the night before, and I left the bar and didn't come back and say hi to her. There was another guy, an African-American guy, who thought I was this tennis player friend, but he wasn't wearing his glasses. And then he put his glasses on, he realized that wasn't him. So, yeah, there were a couple like that.
Well, since I've been talking about my father, they always thought my father was Mitch Miller when he went places.
Oh, really? Okay. I mean, around here, especially when I had a mustache, the Barry Bonds thing, I sort of kind of maybe thought maybe, but a lot of the other people I got compared to on this trip, I thought, no, that's just somebody who's a Black guy who may or may not have a mustache. And the funny thing is, a lot of these guys had mustaches. I didn't have a mustache at the time. No mustache, no beard, just like this. So I am not sure where they got the comparison. No idea.
So did this happen when you were doing other things besides going to missions?
Not really. I mean, every once in a while, someone says you look like whoever, but it just was strange that it just kept happening this one trip. And like I said, I've been compared to Shaft before, like when I had a mustache. Yeah, Barry Bonds around here happens a few times. There's a broadcaster in Chicago who's now in national news named Lester Holt, and back when I had a mustache, people would say I looked like him. But it didn't happen that often. It happened enough that I was like, yeah, I kind of see that, but not on that scale and in that concentrated period of time. It was almost like being on candid camera.
So when you do the show, are you being more, how does it make you feel? And when you do it, are you being more the doctor or the performer in your reaction to people when they make these suggestions that you look like?
It's really a combination of both. I mean, when I'm with people, I'm very professional. I try to be nice and kind, say thank you. Okay. If someone says something obnoxious, then of course I'll go off, but no one was really mean. There's one woman who in one mission was a little bit racist. No, she wasn't a little bit racist. She's pretty much racist, but I know how to handle those people. I just kind of let her go because it wasn't going to change my life, that one interaction. But most of the time I'm fairly calm, and I'll correct people if they say something insensitive or inappropriate or narrow-minded. I have no problem saying that in a professional way. And if they get a little bit confrontational, then I'll usually walk away because I don't want to get in a fight with someone whose mind I can't change. But with those people, it was just so amusing. It got to the point where I'd almost expected it. And if nothing happened, I was almost a little bit weirdly disappointed,
So your reaction was that you thought it was funny?
Well, yeah, it really was funny. I mean, I think back on it and I look at the trip and I said, yeah, well, I'm the only black guy here. So that kind of makes some sense that people are trying to be friendly and, let's make them feel comfortable, which is the assumption I made. And that may be the only way they can deal with it. And I even asked a question, in the show about, do they know anybody who's black? And if they do, is it just the famous ones? It's an icebreaker, I guess. Yeah, but it was not a negative trip in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it was one of the most enjoyable trips I've had, but for me, it just threw in the sharp relief, just, being an African American and, traveling and doing things as a black man who's not someone's, I won't say stereotype view, but I have a lot of different interests in things. I mean, I'm as I say in the show, I'm an African American Protestant going to see Catholic missions. How common is that? Not very. But as I did the show and did the missions, you start to, you unfold the mission history, the history of the Native Americans, and how it's described at some missions and others not. And there's a big discussion that's been going on for years about trying to tell the mission story on the other side. I mean, La Purísima is the one mission I know of, that really does try to tell both sides of the mission history, the Native American history and the Catholic Church history. I know that the curator at Mission Dolores is a descendant of the Ohlone Native American tribe. So he's very vocal about trying to bring about Native American history. It's the same thing with me as a history guy for African American history or Black history. We've when I was growing up, the Civil War description was, picking the 5 Black kids in class as slaves and saying they worked in the fields and then went home and then went to church on Sunday. And that was the history of the Civil War and for slavery. And we all know that a lot of that history was just basically whitewashed. So there were a lot of really interesting parallels as I really unpacked the story, as I unpacked the trip and I started writing this about those kind of histories that we need to describe, and that we need to bring attention to everyone, because I think history is what makes us better people. We look at what happened in the past. That way we can hopefully learn from our mistakes. You don't want to hide it. You want to look at it and you want to acknowledge it and say, okay, this happened then. Why did it happen then? How is it affecting us now? Why are we in this position now based on what happened then? So that's what makes the show, at least for me, really interesting. That's why I love continuing to do it and write it. And that's the response I get from a lot of people. It makes them think. And that's really what you want to do with any show. You want to laugh. And that was the first priority of the show, is making people laugh, but also making teaching points. And as I think Michael Gene Sullivan saw it in the summer, and he said, yeah, what I liked about the show is it's kind of a little cute little gotcha to a lot of things, without hitting people over the head with it. It makes people think, and if they're thinking about it and talking about the missions, or talking about, race identity, or talking about identity in general, or history, that's what you want. That's what I want out of the show. That's what I'm hoping that people get out of it when they see it. They can laugh, but also say, wow, I didn't know about that. Even with the useless mission factoids, you come up with one kind of thing about a mission that makes it come alive, because otherwise history for most people, not me, can be boring. I'm the guy who reads the book about, two kings and king and queen in England who fought for a throne over 19 years. I'm the one who reads about, Tulsa, the Black Wall Street that got torched in the early 1920s. I like reading, because for me, it is human history. It's not the date, it's not the event, it's the people involved with it. That's what makes it interesting.
So do you think the Black Lives Matter movement is going to make people change the way they look at your show, or does it make you feel differently about doing your show?
Not really. I mean, I think it was funny. I was watching Irma Herrera's MarshStream with you. It's kind of the same vein. I think that the show's timely no matter what. But I think given the fact that we've been locked down in COVID for this period, and we had, George Floyd, everything else has been going on, and it's now in people's faces, and everyone now is trying to be active, and I throw out the word an ally, and trying to learn and be educated. I'm hopeful that things will change. And my show, I hope, is a vehicle to help people think more, talk more. Like I say, it's not an in-your-face show. I don't go out and call people racist, but I do talk about, there's a certain amount of bias where it's like, we'll name you as this person here. And then we talk about the fact that certain histories were buried. And I think that's really important with all the movements, especially with Black Lives Matter. It's like, look, let's just start looking at where we were as a country, all this country's history, understanding it, remembering it, and realizing where we are at this point and where we need to go. That's the big thing for me. So yeah, I would love for the show to be a vehicle to help with conversation. Once we get back up and running, the idea I had in the beginning was just to have some, I won't call them scholars, but I use that word for lack of a better term, people about the history of the missions, or African-American history, or people who can talk about bias, that kind of thing. Just any kind of post-show discussion that will lead to more understanding and dialogue, because a lot of the problem we have is, I think this way, and there's no, let's try to understand why you think that way. I'm not naive enough to think that I'm going to change people's minds about race, about sex, about LGBT, about anything. But my goal is to get people to at least sit back and think about why they may have these biases. What has indoctrinated them over their lives to make them think this way, to assume this thing or to assume that thing. That's the hard work that's going to happen. We're in a period where, especially with social media, it's easy to post stuff. I'm with you, I support you, XYZ. That's fine. But I was telling a friend the other day, I said, what happens is when this all kind of blows over, if it does, you as somebody who's white goes back, not you, let's say you, but somebody else goes back to your life and you're basically normal. I go back to, my day where I'm walking home from the marsh 4 months ago, and the cops stopped me because it looked like someone who had recently robbed a bank, even though I was wearing a polo shirt and a jacket and
but you look like that person.
Look like me. So
but you look like that person.
Yeah, kind of. The bad version of that. I wish they'd seen the show. But yeah, I think it's a very timely show. It was a timely show when I first did it. It's interesting that all the events happened 8 years ago, when Obama was president. And there's even one moment in the show where I met San Juan Capistrano, and this little girl is tagging on her dad's leg. And finally, when she gets his attention, he says, "What?" And she looks at me and she says, "Is he like the darky president you and mom hate?" Yeah.
I remember that line.
Yeah. Yep. So it's like, people just need to realize that just because Obama was elected president does not mean we're post-racial. We might be post-racial for the majority of the country, but for me, no. It's, we've got 400 years of stuff to unpack. It's not going to be unpacked with a meme or with reading, a book. The books are wonderful. The education is great. I think that's where people need to start. But I really think that for true change, it's systematic. It's voting. It's financial support. It's not about showing people what you're doing, but just doing it. That's what makes change. I'm going to be doing this. I'll be doing that fight my entire life because, this doesn't come off. When I go home at night, I leave my white friends someplace else and I go home. Yeah, this is 24/7. So,
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have a bunch of questions in the chat. We have some questions and some comments. Although I do want to ask a little funny thing. Is there anything that you wish they thought you look like that somebody has said that they haven't?
Not really. I don't think, it's really, no, I've never really wanted to be anybody famous or look like anybody famous. I don't want that kind of fame. I like being a little bit anonymous,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've never really compared myself to anybody else. So I don't, I've never really been.
What I mean is, what I meant was somebody that you would wish that they recognized you as such. Not that they actually recognized you, but that there was some person that you wonder why they didn't think you were that person.
Not really, because there were so many people that they came up with. A couple of them I already, Richard Roundtree I get, Barry Bonds I get, but they just kind of got so off the wall. It was like, there's not really anybody out there who I think I look like. There's just not. So, and I tend not to look at myself. I don't see myself that way. So when people come up with the comparisons, I look at the picture and kind of go, really?
What were you thinking?
I know. Well, it's not like, there's, I don't have a doppelganger. Doppelgangers are a real thing, I think, because you do have those people, you look at the two pictures and think, wow, they are the same person. Where you can see how they can be mistaken one for the other. But I don't know if there's anybody, I don't think there's anybody famous that I wish someone had said I looked like. Yeah.
So Pat asks, first of all, she says, wonderful show.
Thank you.
What do you think of Santa Ynez mission in Solvang? And can you give us some facts about it? What was your favorite mission and why?
So I won't give away stuff on the show, but I will. So she's asked about Santa Ynez. I forgot what the useless mission factor of Santa Ynez is because I haven't looked at that part of the script in a while. So I apologize for not remembering. But I will say that Santa Ynez I spent the least amount of time in because I didn't know Solvang existed. So to get to Santa Ynez, you have to drive through Solvang. And if you don't know this place is around and you're driving by yourself and you see all this stuff, you think, what kind of medication am I on? Or am I at Epcot Center? So Solvang was the most surprising thing to me about Santa Ynez. And I really spent 5 minutes at Santa Ynez and the rest of the time walking around, Solvang. I liked it, but it was just the most bizarre thing I ever saw.
Did you get the cookies? Did you buy some cookies?
I bought a cookie. I did. I bought a cookie. I even took my wife back down to see Solvang last summer. We went to Madonna and we went back down and we saw Solvang because she had to see it to believe it. So yeah. And I think somebody asked me what my favorite mission was. Was that one of the questions or part of it?
Yeah. What was your favorite mission and why?
My favorite mission, I would have to say, was probably San Juan Capistrano, because it's the only one that was left in absolute ruins. Because the story is that it was built cooperatively with the Franciscans and with the Native Americans, and they built this beautiful, it was really a huge cathedral of the biggest church in North America at the time. And on this morning, they were all at church of like 40 people. This massive earthquake hit, and the roof and the walls caved in. And everybody inside perished, including the 2 kids in the bell tower. And the parishioners and the Franciscans decided they weren't going to rebuild it. They were just going to build a second church or a smaller chapel and leave that alone. And when I visited the place, I mean, you've heard, the swallows come back to Capistrano. I didn't even realize it was a mission until I got there. And I stood inside, and like I said, I've been fortunate enough to see big cathedrals in Europe. And I stood in this one, and all I can do is imagine what it was like to be that large, but also what it was like to be in there when it comes down. I even talk about this in the show. It's like, I imagine, my family, my mother, my grandmother, whoever, being told that we couldn't worship whatever we were doing before, and we had to abide by this new religion. And we did it, and we put our effort into building this new worship structure, and we're in there, and all of a sudden it just kind of comes down. And to me, that was just profound. It is still my favorite mission, just for that history, and just because it really is, they didn't rebuild it, left it alone. And I thought that was extraordinary because it's huge.
Okay, well, Jackie says, I love the convention of the flip chart and simple photos.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you.
Saw the show when you were able to do it. Do you have any other thoughts for sharing the images like video or multimedia?
It's funny, my wife and I, because Kelly's very much into audio video stuff and tech. She's more tech savvy than I am. And we've talked about that. When it's a show that's presented live, once the Marsh opens, I hope to be back there doing it. And it's very much the flip chart and the photographs next to your face, because it makes sense when it's live. For Zoom or for online, there is the possibility of you can still do the flip chart, or you can just have me sitting here talking, and then maybe have the picture of the mission come up here, and then maybe do pictures or photographs of, the celebrities next to my face. Something like that, as opposed to holding things up. So there are possibilities. It's the same idea we came up with if we ever did the show for a huge audience, like a 400-seat or 500-seat theater. You could still do the flip chart, but you could really just do like a big slide showing the mission, and then still have the big projector where you have my mug next to Richard Roundtree or Terrence Howard or whoever. So I hadn't thought of it before, but COVID forces you to rethink things. And it's possible that it could be really interesting done in a lot of different ways. So yeah, it's possible. We've thought about it.
All right. Catherine Keats, who's performing Monday night, said,
Hi, Catherine.
Who was that, the king and the queen? What were those king and queens doing for 19 years as they were fighting over the throne?
So this is the history geek in me coming out. So there's a thing called the anarchy, or they call it the 19 long winters in England. And it was a period where the King of England lost his heir in a ship. It's called the White Ship. He drowned. And there was a fight for 19 years between some say the illegitimate king, who was named Stephen, and the daughter of the king named Matilda. And they fought for control of the British crown for 19 years. Stephen had it first, and then Matilda came in and had an army, and then she took over, but history says that she didn't really get along with the barons, and so they kicked her out, and then Stephen came back in again, and they kind of fought for 19 years, and then the very famous Henry Plantagenet, the one from Lion in Winter, and the one from Becket, who actually was Matilda's son, came in and became king, and then established what's called the Plantagenet line, which ruled England for about 300 years. So that's those kings, Stephen and Matilda.
So does that mean that Matilda won out, or did
No,
her son kill her?
Yeah, she did win out in the end because Stephen didn't have much power, and she got a guarantee that her son would be king. So essentially, she won.
And her son didn't kill her or anything?
Nope.
Didn't fight against her?
Nope.
That's good.
Yep.
Let's see. Do you think, Jackie says the show is so funny, but watching it now amidst pandemic racism, I can't help but see this through a sadder lens. How do you anticipate audiences receiving the show in the current social climate?
I think when you see the show, it is still funny. Even the reactions before this period, people still would cringe a little bit or a lot of bit at some of the interactions I had with people. The ones I had in the show today are relatively tame compared to some of them. And they're cringeworthy, but it's also reality. It's my reality. And I think that's what needs to happen. I mean, I as a side thing, I had posted something on my Facebook page maybe a month ago, during the pandemic race thing, because I kind of thought, well, I need to just post what's happened to me, because I think Irma had a quote about something like, the shortest distance between two people is a story, she said during the stream.
Mhm.
And I said, well, I just need to bring the race part home. So I basically posted a video that my wife and I did. And I said, this is the first time I was called the N-word. The most recent time I was called the N-word, which is about 2 months ago. The first time I was profiled by the police when I was in high school. And the most recent time I was profiled by the police, which was, in my neighborhood 2 months ago. And I just basically said, this happens all the time. So I just wanted to bring it to the forefront, because you can read about it and ignore it, especially if you're not a minority, because it's not happening to you. But when you bring it home, my hope is that it makes people realize that no one's safe. No one's safe. I mean, Black people, white people, Asians, whatever. We're all humans. So what affects one population affects all of us. And my goal with the show is not to berate, but just to say, look, this happens. It's a funny way of looking at it, but just think about this. Be aware of this. Make change, be active. Just don't sit on the sidelines and say I want to and then get inertia. Just it takes risk, real risk, to make change, and it takes real risk to be uncomfortable. And I just tell people, how uncomfortable are you willing to be? And hopefully people are willing to be uncomfortable.
Well,
Yeah.
Fred, it's after 8:30. Can you believe it?
Wow, is it really? I guess it is.
Do you have any last minute things you might want to say? There's a bunch of questions we can't get to, and everybody loves your show and thanks you for it.
Well, I'm so thank you for inviting. I'm just glad people tuned in and liked the show. I mean, it's as an actor, when you do straight theater, it's easier to do it because you're doing somebody else's words with a whole bunch of people. But as a solo performer, I have so much respect for the people who've been doing solo performance for years, because it's so hard to write and work on and put your own work out there, because if it doesn't work, you take it personally. So I'm being very sincere when I say thank you everyone for the kind words about the show. I hope you all get to see it. Hopefully we'll do it, on a tech level, Zoom level, however we want to do it, and hopefully it'll be live as well. I'd love doing the show.
Well, that's wonderful. I do have one last question.
Yes, please.
So you went after this mission thing. Have you come up with your next thing yet?
Well, I want to get this one performed at the Marsh first, and really get a good run of it before I do any other solo show. Although I will say, shout out to Diane Barnes. She told me that when she found out I was an ER doctor, she said, you've got another show you can do just on the stuff you saw in the ER. So it's in the back of my head, maybe some kind of a medical show, but I want to do a bunch of runs of, the show is now called Aren't You, as opposed to California Race and Mission Story is now called Aren't You. I want to get a few runs of that in, and then maybe I'll think about doing something else.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Fred. This has been wonderful. So
Stephanie, thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful. I really am flattered that you invited me in. I feel like I'm a newbie, so I'm really excited about being given the chance.
I'm so glad you did. Yeah, and let's ask people to support the MarshStream.
Absolutely.
By giving a tip in our tip jar and donate to us, so we can keep our, we were saying our PBS, but then we don't want to infringe on PBS.
Right. Exactly.
So we're saying PBP. What do you think? I just came up with that today.
That works, actually. You should copyright that. Copyright that.
PBP. MarshStream PPP. So please support us. Come and see our shows.